21. That is how many Mercedes sold of its newest electric car in China in a single month. Not 21,000, not 2,100, 21 cars. And the strange part is, this was not supposed to be the failure. This was supposed to be the comeback. This was the car Mercedes built after learning from humiliation, after throwing away its first electric strategy, after realizing that Tesla had changed the rules and China had changed them even faster. It beat the Tesla Model 3 on range. It won Car of the Year in Europe. It brought in a new 800-volt architecture, a new operating system, artificial intelligence from both Microsoft and Google, and the kind of software Mercedes was told for years it could never build. On paper, this was the moment the oldest name in the car business finally answered Tesla. In reality, in the most important electric car market on Earth, almost nobody cared. And that is the contradiction at the center of this entire story. Mercedes finally built a world-class EV, and it still discovered that great engineering does not automatically save a wounded brand. Because while the new cars were winning awards in Europe, Mercedes was bleeding where it once made its fortune. Profit in the passenger car business collapsed by as much as 64% in one quarter. Sales in China fell 28% in the first half of 2026. Dealers were fighting discounts. Workers were being offered buyouts. Historic sites were being sold. And quietly, while all of this was happening, Chinese state-owned companies ended up holding close to 1/5 of Mercedes-Benz itself. So the same country where Mercedes is losing the sales war is also becoming one of the biggest owners of the company that invented the automobile. That is not just a bad quarter. That is a strategic trap snapping shut. And Mercedes built that trap with its own hands. To understand why, you have to go back to the moment when everything looked perfect. In 2022, Mercedes-Benz was standing on top of the world. This is the company that traces its origin to 1886, the company built around the idea that the car itself began with a Mercedes. And at that exact moment, the numbers looked untouchable. Operating profit was north of 20 billion euros. Margins were near 15% in an industry where 8% can be considered healthy. Analysts looked at Mercedes and saw a brand that had somehow turned heritage into pricing power. Ola Källenius, the chief executive, made a bold call. Mercedes would stop trying to be a car company for everyone. It would move higher, chase pure luxury, and build machines for people who did not just need transportation, but wanted objects of desire. The idea sounded clean. Sell fewer cars, charge more money, protect the badge, lift the margin. Prices jumped by more than 40%, profits surged, and for one brief moment, it looked like a masterstroke. But Mercedes made one fatal mistake. It confused strategy with luck. Those record years were not simply proof that buyers would pay anything for a three-pointed star. They were also a product of the global chip shortage, a once-in-a-generation supply crunch that strangled production across the entire industry. When there are not enough cars, every car maker suddenly looks powerful. Discounts disappear. Waiting lists get longer. Customers accept prices they would have challenged in a normal market. Mercedes looked at those conditions and treated them like a permanent new reality. But when chips started flowing again and production recovered, the illusion began to crack. Demand for cars above 100,000 euros was not as deep as Stuttgart wanted to believe. The luxury ladder was real, but it was not infinite, and Mercedes had built a strategy around the assumption that the very top of the market would keep expanding forever. Then came the car that exposed the whole thing. The EQS was supposed to be the electric S-Class, the proof that Mercedes could take its flagship formula and carry it into the EV age. On paper, it had genuine brilliance. It achieved the lowest drag coefficient of any production car in the world. That is not marketing fluff. That is serious engineering. Mercedes obsessed over aerodynamics because efficiency matters in an electric car, and the EQS was shaped to slice through the air with almost no resistance. But luxury cars are not sold only on spreadsheets. They are sold on desire. They are sold on presence. They are sold on the feeling a buyer gets when the valet pulls up and everyone knows exactly what just arrived. And in person, the EQS did not feel like the future of Mercedes luxury. It looked smooth, swollen, and anonymous, like an inflated bar of soap with a six-figure price tag. People could not immediately tell it was a Mercedes. That alone was a disaster. Because at that level, subtlety is not the same as invisibility. Critics called it awkward. Customers said it did not feel like a real Mercedes. And then the resale market delivered the verdict with no emotion at all. In the United States, the EQS lost nearly half its value in its first year. Dealers had cars sitting for more than 100 days. For a luxury buyer, depreciation is not just a financial inconvenience. It is a signal. When someone spends six figures on a car, they expect it to behave like a Rolex, a Hermes bag, or a collectible object with status attached. The EQS behaved like a used appliance nobody wanted after the warranty clock started ticking, and Mercedes made the wound worse by doing the one thing a luxury brand should fear most. It slashed prices. Not quietly, not by a token amount. In some cases, the EQS was cut by nearly 30,000 euros. Imagine buying one on Monday and waking up Tuesday to learn that the company itself had just erased the value of your decision. Ferrari does not train its customers to wait for clearance. Rolex does not protect its aura by running panic discounts. Mercedes did, and every current owner and future buyer understood the message. This car was never worth what we told you it was. That would have been dangerous enough if Mercedes still had a broad foundation underneath it. But the pure luxury strategy had encouraged the company to push away some of the boring, unglamorous businesses that had supported it for decades. Vans and commercial vehicles were never the sexy part of Mercedes, but they were reliable. They were useful. They gave the company a cushion when the high end got shaky. They were the shock absorber, and Mercedes had been trying to look cleaner, more luxurious, more focused for investors, so it stripped away parts of the safety net right before the luxury bet started wobbling. That is how the trap worked. Mercedes raised prices in a distorted market, mistook temporary scarcity for permanent strength, narrowed its identity around ultra-luxury, launched an electric flagship that buyers did not desire, damaged trust through depreciation and discounts, and had less underneath it when the fall began. This was not one bad car. It was a chain reaction, and the same pattern showed up beyond the EQS. AMG, the performance heart of Mercedes, made the mistake of forgetting why people loved it. For decades, AMG meant emotion. It meant power that felt slightly unreasonable. It meant the sound and drama of a big engine, especially the thunderous V8 that gave the badge its personality. Then Mercedes replaced the legendary V8 in the new AMG C63 with a 4-cylinder hybrid system. Technically, it was clever. On paper, the numbers could be defended. But buyers at that level are not purchasing a mathematics lesson. They are buying feeling. They are buying theater. They are buying the thing that makes an AMG feel different from a normal expensive sedan with extra horsepower. Mercedes engineered out the soul and expected the customer to applaud the efficiency. Many did not. Then Mercedes tried to copy Apple with fixed pricing and no negotiation. That might work when the product is an iPhone and the store is built around simple retail psychology. But car buyers, especially luxury car buyers, have their own rituals. They expect a relationship with the dealer. They expect a little negotiation. They expect to feel like the purchase was handled personally. Turning showrooms into pickup counters did not feel modern to everyone. To some buyers, it felt cold. At the same time, quality complaints became harder to ignore. Hard plastics appeared in expensive interiors. EV recalls raised concerns over battery fire risk. And then in early 2026, Mercedes quietly killed its Level 3 self-driving system, the technology that had been promoted as a crown jewel for the S-Class, because it was too expensive and too few people bought it. Think about the symbolism. The inventor of the automobile withdrew one of its most advanced innovations because the business case did not work. That was not just a product decision. It was a warning that even Mercedes could no longer afford to build technology merely to prove it was Mercedes. But none of those wounds hit like China. China was not just another market. China was the market that made the whole modern Mercedes machine work. For years, more than a third of every Mercedes sold anywhere in the world went to China. For the most expensive cars, including the S-Class and Maybach, the dependence was even heavier. Chinese demand funded the profits, supported the dividends, and covered mistakes elsewhere. The company could make strategic errors in Europe or America and still look healthy because China was absorbing enormous volumes of high-margin cars. It was the safety net under the safety net. Then the net tore open, not because of a recession, not because Mercedes forgot how to build leather seats or smooth engines. It happened because the customer changed. A 30-year-old Chinese millionaire no longer needed a German badge to feel successful. Local brands like BYD, NIO, and Xiaomi began building electric cars at a speed that made the German development cycle look ancient. A traditional German car can take 4 or 5 years from concept to showroom. Chinese companies can move in roughly 24 months. And these were not cheap copies anymore. They had better phone integration, stronger software experiences, more convincing driver assistance, and prices that made Mercedes look expensive in the wrong way. In Stuttgart, the three-pointed star still carried a century of prestige. In Shanghai, younger buyers began seeing it as something their parents wanted. That is a devastating shift, because when a luxury badge loses cultural momentum, engineering alone cannot instantly bring it back. Mercedes could improve the range, it could improve the screens, it could improve the software, but it could not force a new generation of Chinese buyers to feel the old desire. That is why the number 21 matters so much. It is not just a sales figure, it is a cultural verdict. And yet, this is where the story turns, because Mercedes did something that companies in decline often fail to do. It learned from the humiliation. After the EQS, Mercedes did not simply polish the same formula and pretend the market was wrong. It rebuilt its electric strategy around a different idea. The new electric CLA was not a hand-built, money-losing flagship trying to impress investors with aerodynamics. It was a scalable, software-defined, technically aggressive EV designed to go straight at Tesla, where Tesla was strongest. And the result is genuinely impressive. The new CLA uses an 800-volt architecture, the kind of high-voltage system that once belonged mostly to much more expensive electric cars. It delivers an EPA range of 374 miles, enough to beat the Tesla Model 3. In Europe, it won Car of the Year 2026 and was named the safest car in its test group. That means this is not some reluctant compliance vehicle built because regulators demanded it. This is Mercedes swinging back. But the real breakthrough is not just the battery or the range. It is the operating system. The CLA is the first Mercedes built on MB.ES, the Mercedes-Benz operating system. And that matters because for years the criticism of legacy car companies was brutally simple. They could build great machines, but they could not build great software. Tesla's advantage was never only acceleration or battery packaging. It was the fact that a Tesla felt like a computer on wheels. It updated overnight. It improved after purchase. It made older automotive companies look frozen in time. MB.ES is Mercedes admitting that the old model is over. The car is now software-defined, with over-the-air updates for key systems, including driver assistance. That changes the ownership psychology. A car no longer has to be at its technical peak on delivery day. It can gain features later. It can become more capable while sitting in your garage. For the kind of buyer who chose Tesla because Mercedes felt digitally behind, that gap suddenly got much smaller. And then Mercedes added a detail that no other car maker had delivered in quite the same way. The new system runs artificial intelligence from both Microsoft and Google at the same time. Two rival tech giants inside one dashboard in a car that starts below $60,000. You can speak to it naturally, ask real questions, plan routes, and let the system learn patterns around how you use the car. That is not buried inside a $250,000 concept machine. It is in the entry point of the Mercedes range. That is the important part. Mercedes is not treating software as a decorative luxury feature anymore. It is making it the foundation. And the CLA is only the opening shot. Behind it comes the electric GLC, and that may matter even more. The gas GLC is Mercedes' best-selling model worldwide, which means the electric version is not a side project. It is the EV that has to pay the bills. Mercedes revealed it at CES in Las Vegas, not at a traditional auto show, and that choice was a message. This car is meant to be understood as technology as much as transportation. The electric GLC brings 483 horsepower, the same 800-volt charging philosophy, range of up to 443 miles, and an optional 39-inch screen stretching across the dashboard, the largest Mercedes has ever installed. More importantly, the CLA and GLC share the same platform logic, the same operating system, the same charging technology, and the same digital brain. That is how you build EVs profitably. Not by handcrafting one expensive flagship and hoping prestige covers the losses, but by spreading one technical foundation across volume models people actually buy. In other words, Mercedes did not only build better EVs, it fixed part of the math that made the first generation so fragile. And outside China, that correction appears to be working. In the second quarter of 2026, Mercedes global electric sales jumped roughly 50%. In Europe, electric sales more than doubled. In North America, they climbed as well. The CLA quickly became one of the strongest cars in its class in Europe. So the lazy version of this story would be wrong. Mercedes is not simply dead. It has built serious EVs. It has crossed part of Tesla's software moat. It has proven that an old guard brand can adapt when the pain gets large enough. That should worry Tesla, because Tesla spent years benefiting from the belief that legacy car makers were too slow, too bureaucratic, and too trapped in old engineering culture to catch up. Mercedes just showed that one of the dinosaurs can learn to write software, build on 800 volts, use artificial intelligence properly, and package it in cars normal premium buyers can actually consider. But both things are true at the same time. Mercedes is winning back credibility in the West while still losing the market that made it rich. And that is why this comeback is so complicated. If Mercedes only sold cars in Europe and America, this would be a clean recovery story. The first EV strategy failed. The company learned, the new products arrived, buyers returned, and Tesla suddenly had a serious legacy rival with a luxury badge. But Mercedes does not live only in Europe and America. It lives in a global industry where China is the center of electric car gravity. And in China, the problem is no longer simply product, it is relevance. A great car can beat a Model 3 on range. It can win awards. It can run Microsoft and Google in the dashboard. But it cannot automatically make a young Chinese buyer want a German logo when local brands feel faster, smarter, cheaper, and more culturally current. That is a deeper problem than a bad model cycle. It is the downward spiral of irrelevance. Sell fewer cars, and you lose leverage with suppliers. Lose leverage, and your batteries, chips, and components get more expensive. Higher costs force higher prices. Higher prices cost you more buyers. Fewer buyers weaken your scale even further. Suddenly the heavyweight becomes the company begging for terms, while Tesla and BYD order at volumes that command priority. This is the nightmare Mercedes has to avoid, because once that loop begins, prestige alone does not break it. Meanwhile, the financial pressure keeps tightening. American tariffs squeeze European exports into the United States. Margins are already under pressure. Mercedes is targeting billions of euros in savings. Around 40,000 workers have reportedly been offered buyouts. Shifts are being cut. Historic German sites are being sold off. And unlike BMW or Volkswagen, Mercedes has no powerful family anchor holding the structure steady. BMW has the Quant family. Volkswagen has the Porsche clan. Mercedes has a much larger free float, with around 70% of shares in the hands of investors who can leave when returns disappoint. So in the middle of one of the hardest stretches in its modern history, Mercedes has been buying back shares to support the stock and keep investors calm. That can buy time. It does not buy a future. The most unsettling number remains the ownership stake. Chinese state-owned companies now hold close to 20% of Mercedes-Benz. That is not a takeover today, but it changes the atmosphere around the company. Every time the share price falls, control becomes cheaper. Every time China sales weaken, Mercedes becomes more dependent on markets where it has less room for error. The country where Mercedes is losing customer desire is also the country with growing financial influence over the company itself. That is the kind of paradox that would have sounded impossible 20 years ago. The inventor of the automobile, the symbol of German industrial prestige, vulnerable not because it forgot how to engineer, but because the world around it moved faster than its strategy. And that is why Tesla never saw this exact version of Mercedes coming. Tesla expected legacy brands to struggle with software, batteries, speed, and culture. For a while, that was true. The EQS proved how badly a brilliant engineering company could misunderstand desire in the electric age. But the CLA and GLC prove something different. They prove that Mercedes can still respond, and when it responds properly, it can build cars that challenge Tesla on the very ground Tesla used to own. The danger for Tesla is not that Mercedes is suddenly invincible. The danger is that Mercedes is wounded and learning. A wounded giant with a real operating system, 800-volt charging, global luxury recognition, and scalable platforms is far more dangerous than a comfortable giant still pretending the old world exists. But the danger for Mercedes is just as clear. Great cars may save the West and still fail to save the company from the East. They may restore credibility with European buyers while doing almost nothing to recover the lost magic in China. They may prove that Tesla's moat can be crossed, while also proving that BYD, NIO, and Xiaomi are fighting a different war entirely, one built on speed, software, price, and local identity. So Mercedes ends up trapped between two truths. It is not dead, because the new electric CLA and GLC are some of the strongest legacy EVs on the market. And it is not safely back, because China is collapsing, investors are restless, costs are rising, and a near 20% Chinese stake hangs over the company like a warning light on the dashboard. The three-pointed star still means something. The question is whether it means enough in the places where the future is being decided. Because for the first time in a century, Mercedes does not get to define what luxury mobility means and wait for the world to agree. It has to react. It has to chase. It has to prove that heritage can move at software speed. And maybe that is the real story here. Not that Tesla destroyed Mercedes. Not that Mercedes destroyed Tesla. But that the electric age has become ruthless enough to humble both of them. Tesla now has to face a legacy brand that finally learned the software lesson. Mercedes has to face a Chinese market that no longer worships the badge. And the rest of the car industry has to watch the company that invented the automobile fight for relevance in a world it once owned. So where do you land on this? Are the CLA and electric GLC proof that Mercedes quietly built the best legacy EV comeback in the business? Or does the China collapse show that even brilliant cars cannot save a fading star? Either way, the old rules are gone, and Mercedes just became the clearest warning of what happens when prestige meets a market that has stopped being impressed.